Hello, this is Dr. Cynthia Krenzel-Doggett with another video to help you prepare for Iowa All State Band and Orchestra Auditions 2014 for the B-flat clarinet. This is the second half of the etude on page 51. We stopped after the sort of fingering mess at the end of the fourth line. I was recommending that you could slide. If you go down to the next line, to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fifth line, that's the next place where I take a breath. I breathe after the E sharp, the dotted 8th, 16th figure. So, yeah, so the second measure of the fifth line. So, okay. There are not a lot of great places to breathe in this etude. It's just the reality. So the breathing places that I'm choosing are either where sort of a new phrase begins, or a new figure at least begins, where I might otherwise put in a big change in dynamics, or, as I said, a new phrase, or here where there's just a little bit of a break, enough of a break where you can just grab a really quick breath. And it helps to have more air going up into the high register as well. So there's that, and then the next thing to mention, well, I guess the end of that line, I use, again, this F sharp, the middle finger with the pinky, and if you need to add that. I don't half hole here because I want to keep the pitch up and go pretty quickly over that note. When you get to the next line, the third line from the bottom, we come to some more tricky fingering things, starting in the second measure. So the note right before the second measure is D sharp, so that has to be on the right, and that means that our C sharp needs to be on the left, and then B sharp on the right, and that's when I slide up to D sharp on the right also, because then we have another C sharp. Now I have an extra key here, but I'm assuming that the vast majority of you do not. So the fingerings I'm giving you, if you have the extra D sharp, E flat key, then you could just work that in, but as I said, I assume that most of you don't. So. So the fingerings that I'm using there, just like above, C sharp on the left, B sharp on the right, D sharp on the right, C sharp on the left. And then I just follow that pattern as we did up above if I do it down here. Now, the difference, what I'm changing here is that I'm actually going to slow down in that second measure. So this is a choice that I'm making as a musical choice. It's not about fingerings. But because in the second to last line, we come back to the very opening theme again, or the very opening melody, I think that's important, and I'd like to make sure that I show that off somehow. One way that you can do that is to slow down leading up to it, and then when it comes back in at tempo, it's much more noticeable that we have arrived again at this opening melody. Let's see. And actually there's two benefits to this. It allows you to take a nice big breath right before the end. So you get a great big breath before the downbeat of the second to last line. And it allows you to switch your fingers so you don't have to continue to do the left-right thing. When you take your breath, you can go to C sharp on the right and start there like you did at the very beginning. So even though I end up on a D sharp on the right, then I take a breath, I lift up my finger, and I go to C sharp on the right without having to slide. So it works out mechanically in terms of fingers, it works out really nicely, but I think the more important question is, does it work musically? Personally, I like it. Don't feel obligated to do that just because I'm doing it. It's a personal choice. There's nothing written in that says you should do that, but you know, in an etude like this, I think it's better to take a little bit of liberty and do something interesting with it. Now, it is a bit harder, actually, to slow down. And ironically, it's easier if you just keep going and you don't stop. But if you slow the tempo down like that, it needs to be really controlled, and so you need to practice the slowing down of it. Other than that, let's say you choose not to slow down there, you're going to need another breath most likely. If I take my breath there, so it's hard for me to say where I would breathe. You might be able to just slip a really quick breath in there without slowing down. Another place you could consider breathing would be after the first beat of the last measure of that line. So this is it's a D sharp. So I'm talking about the last measure of the second to last line. I would breathe between the D sharp and the G sharp. Hopefully you know where I'm at. One thing I also want to mention there is that in this last measure again of the second to last line, you have D sharp, then I take a breath, G sharp, F double sharp, G sharp. Then I do B on the right, then A sharp, and then you have to switch to B on the left so that you can get to D sharp on the right. So it's a little bit tricky. You want to, normally you would do your B, both on one side, but here you have to switch. So make sure you practice that, and I'll write it in. Other than that, I think it's pretty cut and dry, nothing more difficult than any other place in this etude. The last two notes, however, I do want to mention that you're aware of the fact that the clarinet, when you play loud down low, especially so low as this F sharp, the pitch tends to go flat. So make sure you don't go open up to get a really big sound. Keep the focus in your sound, keep the tongue position like in that E position, and just use more strength in the abdominal muscles to push out extra fast air to get a big sound. Otherwise, you run the risk of going flat. So also just use your ear and have the tuner nearby. The high F sharp, in this case, I use a different fingering. I use the full F sharp here. So it's, thumb and register key, these two, these three, and the pinky here. And you can also half hole. That can help with tone. And half hole is, you maybe saw this in the other video, essentially you're just covering half of that hole, and I do it by, you kind of think about pivoting that knuckle down, and then the finger actually moves and rests against this key here, and the hole is covered halfway. If it's easiest if you have a teacher showing you how to do that, sitting next to you and saying, yes, that's good, or no, that's not quite right. You don't have to use the half hole, but it can help you get a better tone and can lower the pitch of your high. It is really, really important that you practice slowly. You practice slowly and accurately. Remember that every time you sit down in front of the music stand, you're practicing something. You're either practicing playing it correctly with a good sound and dynamics and all these other things, or you're practicing making mistakes. So it's just not efficient to play even at a moderate tempo. Don't practice at a tempo where, oh yeah, I kind of get through it right there. Take a tempo where you can play it without making any mistakes, and that might be dee da dee dum bum bum. This might be your triplet eighth note on the metronome. That is much better than trying to kind of fake it through a yada dee dee da dum tempo. You'll get faster much more quickly if you practice really slowly at first. And I know it's very trying on the patients, but it's totally worth it. Take my word for it, and the word of many, many other clarinetists who would probably tell you the exact same thing. Slowly and accurately is far more efficient. So, and I wish you all the best of luck, and I congratulate you on taking on this challenge. It is a lot of work, a lot of hard work, but it's definitely worth it, and you'll learn a lot in the process, whether or not you get into All State. But I wish you all luck, and yeah, congratulations on taking on this challenge.